What's up, wrestling fans and trading card collectors? Welcome to the live stream. Hopefully, everything is working well. Hopefully, the audio and video are great. If you come into the chat and I'm unfamiliar with your name and you put a message out there, please reply with your Twitter name or however we would recognize you. But thanks to everybody for watching today. And let's just kind of run over what we're going to be doing. So I know this is a weird start time to do a live stream. A lot of people do the live streams in the night, but a lot of times I don't have time for that. So I just try to work these in when I can, repurpose the video for later on. So again, weird start time. We're going to cover some Patreon questions. I got some questions from two different Patreon members. One of them's a little bit lengthier. It's like a multi-part question. I'm going to be covering that and going to cover some topics such as like what's going on with the podcast, some news and notes on that. And obviously everybody probably with the clickbait title, if you want to even call it that, the hobby feuds, so to speak, a lot of that nonsense going on. So we're going to touch on that a little bit. And then I'm going to talk about some of my favorite non-wrestling card content that I like to consume. So what I'm talking about and why I would mention that is because there's a lot of things, as I've said in past videos and podcasts, that you can really learn from other aspects of the hobby or other people doing things. So let's just go ahead and jump right into the questions. So our first question on Patreon, and I'm reading these right from the messages that I got sent. First one is from Collecting with Caleb Adkins. Again, if you guys have not checked out Collecting with Caleb on YouTube, make sure to go check out his channel. It's fantastic. And it mainly covers indie cards and those kind of. So if you're really into indie cards, make sure to check his channel out. Please subscribe while you're there. Give me 1 second. I'm going to check on my mic settings here. And again, if you are already here and you like what you're hearing, please subscribe. You can fast forward through this after the fact if you so choose. Hopefully this. And as you guys can see, I'm a newer I don't live stream a whole lot, so. All right, so let's go with the first question. Again, Collecting with Caleb. What do you think of the future of 2020 through 2022 sealed wax will be? Most boxes came out really high and are starting to get put on clearance. He referenced Slam Attacks Chrome, AEW, etc. Time to buy or hold, or what do we do? So I've always been a proponent of sealed wax. There's obviously some caveats to that. If you are running on a shoestring budget, if you like to flip things, if you know that's kind of more of a quicker way of operating in the hobby, then maybe not so much, because if you are buying that and you're looking to flip it in a week or 2 weeks like we did in 2020 or 21, maybe not so much anymore. Retail is, as he said, being put on clearance in some cases because nobody's buying it. Nobody is ripping, grading, flipping. Okay, so I lied. That is happening still, but it's not happening at the volume and the pace that we saw in the past. And obviously, if that's not happening, the retail is going to continue sitting on the shelf. It goes to clearance. So Caleb's question, do you start holding those? Sure, absolutely. If you can afford it to just purchase it at the retail price, even if it's clearance. If it's clearance, all bets are off. Like, you should pretty much be buying anything clearance if you can afford it. But if you're okay with holding sealed wax, just getting it, putting it on the shelf, then setting on it for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 20 years, whatever, and that's not going to be some kind of financial burden on you, or you're not looking to flip it really quick, I absolutely think sealed wax is always a good bet, especially if you can get it at retail or below, because let's face it, the breaker culture that has kind of infiltrated the hobby within the last couple of years, people become addicted to it. It's an easier way to get cards. They can buy into a break and get some big high, one of one big high-end cards at a fraction of a price of what it would cost them to go out and buy that regularly. So, breaking is going to continue to be more popular. It's becoming more of a social thing with live streaming the breaks and, cheering each other on, all that kind of stuff. So I think that, on the surface, there's only so much wax out there that's produced. And, people can say it's mass produced, kind of like they did with the Panini WWE stuff that people were saying it's just printed to the moon, and it may be. But the fact is that so many people are ripping products that every time something's broke, a box is broken, there's that much less of it out in the wild. So at some point, you're going to get down to such a low number, and it may be that that product isn't even that sought after. Maybe it is. Maybe there's a really good rookie class like Prism. I still think Prism is a good buy because look at what the 2002 Fleer Royal Rumble cards are selling for. People are still going out there to find base rookie cards. And many people are saying that, well, there's nothing in Prism. There's some rookie cards available, sure, but nobody wants silver Prisms or the uh, I don't know, pick a parallel. It doesn't matter anything outside gold or one of one, and they're saying like, oh, people don't want that, and it's not true. Again, people want these base rookie cards. Like people are still looking for Heritage Cody Rhodes rookie cards out of boxes. So 20 years from now, Prism rookie card, base rookie cards could be sought after. We just don't know. But my argument to holding sealed wax is the fact that if anything is broken, there's just that much less of it out there. And even if, there are people that still go after the WCW boxes that Topps put out in 98 and even the retail stuff that there are no autographs in. People still want that stuff. So again, if you can afford it, if you can get wax at retail or lower, definitely on clearance, I would say pick it up, put it on the shelf. Caleb, thanks again for the question. Thanks again for being a member of Patreon. And we're moving over to the next question, which is a multi-part question from Dan Evans. And I'm reading this directly verbatim. He's a UK. Says, I'm UK based and I feel the collecting card scene is underdeveloped, especially compared to the US. This means that we get very few products on retail shelves, such as supermarkets. For example, you cannot find WWE Prism at all in UK stores. It's online only. So my question is, again, we're going to break this down. This is the first part. Has wrestling cards shelf space in the United States retail stores grown or shrunk over the last few years as the UK often follows US trends? So, of course, it's increased some because once Panini took over and then at the end of Topps, when they were just kind of flooding stuff out, we started seeing an extra space or two. Well, I did. Again, I'll speak for myself personally and my personal experience. We started seeing an extra space or two on the shelf that would have the extra Topps products or AEW came out, so maybe there was a WWE section and an AEW. Now, does that mean that these shelves are overflowing? No. Wrestling is still such a minute part of the hobby shelf space when you go to retail. Even hobby stores, like if I go to my LCS, I would see maybe one box period. It could even be a blaster, just one box period of wrestling cards in the hobby shop. So is it growing from a collector base? Yes. And from singles base? Yes. Online purchases? Yes. But from shelf space within stores, very, very little. Like to the point where maybe you just should say no because it's so small. But let's move on to the next question. He says, Dan says, I'm new to the hobby ever since let me start over. I'm also new to the hobby since first collecting when I was a kid, which was 30 years ago. I've been blown away by the amount of variations in each set. I'm not sure what kind of answer I'm looking for with this question, but to what extent do you value card age over rarity? Example being numbered cards. I feel the rarity is very difficult to establish properly. And saying it would be great to own a one of one Roman Reigns, but if there are 50 different one of one Roman Reigns cards with just a different design, then this reduces the amount of rarity. However, age of a card cannot be disputed. So I guess the question is, do you think numbered cards have an overinflated value as so many of them are released? So it depends. There are numbered cards from the 90s that say we're out of 100. And you might say, if we're going to talk wrestling, I will specifically use the example with the Undertaker auto and the Macho Man auto. And for that, I would say, it says there's 500. Modern collectors are going to see 500 and obviously like, oh, there's 500 of those. It's not worth this, or you only should pay that based on pack odds, blah, blah, blah. But really, with those 90s cards and the older numbered cards, some of them could still be in boxes. Some of them are probably thrown away. Some of them are probably who knows where. So the difference in numbered cards in the past to current is definitely different. Because you'll see like I don't know, let's say I sold on my eBay store. Quick plug for that. You can check the links in the show notes for my eBay store if you'd like to purchase something, help support the show. But like I sold a blue, I think it was a blue out of 150, blue refractor Dolph Ziggler out of 2020 finest. And it sit in my store for like $3 to $4 for a long time. Finally took a best offer at $2. And somebody may say, well, there's only 150 of those or 200 or whatever. It's got to be rare. Why'd you sell it for two? It's because the market is dictating that those lower numbered cards, yeah, they may be a little bit more valuable or sought after than a base card, but not by a whole lot. In contrast to the one of ones, the golds, out of fives, anything basically a print run of 10 or less, always going to be pretty high demand for those things, especially if it's a name. I mean, if you've got an out of 10 Omos, not going to get anywhere near the popularity or prices as it would out of 10 MJF or something like that, just comparing names versus the numbers of the rarity. So his question are kind of breaking this second part down into even two more parts. Are the number cards overvalued from the stance of a rarity sake? I say no, because there's only one of those out there. So let's take Roman Reigns. Hypothetically, let's say he does have 50 one of ones. Each one of those one of ones is individual to that card. And there's super collectors out there. There are collectors out there who want specific sets. So maybe they only want Chrome. They only want Transcendent. They only want Finest. They only want Prism. There's all these different ways that people collect. So you're going to have a market for each one of these one of ones. Or again, you've got the super collectors who just want everything. So I still think again, numbered 10 or less, outside of that, gold parallels are always going to be sought after, even though, I've voiced my opinion on that. I do get sick of seeing them all the time. But that being said, I still think the numbered stuff is going to be more valuable than what he is referencing here. And this is just older cards. So just because something is old doesn't mean it's worth anything. And that's something that I think a lot of people found out during the pandemic is they went to their parents' house or their closet or whatever it was. They grabbed out all their old cards and they're like, oh, this stuff's old. It's from the 90s. My dad said to put this away and it would put me through college. It's got to be worth a fortune. And then they take it to their card store. They take it to a dealer. They take it somewhere to sell it. And they're like, I'll give you $5 or $10 for this monster box because it's just junk wax era sports cards. They're mass produced. They're base cards. They don't have any way of differentiating themselves from anything else. And I think that's the difference. Now, you want to say like a Hogan All Stars card? Let's say it's an auto because there's a lot of those floating around. Hogan All Stars auto, pick your grade, whatever. Compared to a one of one Black Hulk Hogan, you're talking like two totally different things because the Hogan All Stars is looked by many as the Mickey Mantle 52 mantle of the wrestling card space, as opposed to the one of one might only appeal to Hulk Hogan super collectors, modern collectors, Prism collectors. Maybe some of the old school crowd actually goes into that too. I don't know, but that's an instance where there's a key iconic card being the Hogan that might actually overshadow a one of one. I'm not saying that's a fact. I'm just bringing that argument that that's a situation where an older card could be more valuable, as opposed to if you've got a bunch of 1990 classic or 90, like here's a good example, 1991 classic Undertaker cards. If you compare those compared to gold refractors or the Prism Blacks or whatever it is that's out there that's more of a modern, limited, scarce run, even like I think they were made in a German kids magazine that have Disney logo on them. There's an Undertaker card in there. Technically, that's older, but it may be more rare than some of these other cards that people are, seeking after. So a lot of different variables in this, and I don't know. We'll just have to see what the market kind of finds out on that, and it's personal preference, of course. We're going to talk about personal preference and opinions later in this show. The last part of his question, this one's fun. The Orient Express were involved in lots of big events in the early 90s, including the Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, and SummerSlam. Why don't they seem to have more cards? What's up with that? All right, so my opinion on this is that cardboard relevancy. I talk about this a lot. And when the diehard wrestling fan might remember Orient Express. They might remember the Full-Blooded Italians from ECW. They might remember Rage and Chaos from WCW and them being a tag team. But do they really matter in the grand scheme of wrestling cards? And most of the time, it's a no. Now, obviously, I've said it before, there are markets and collectors for everybody out there. I don't think any specific card is trash. Every card has a home somewhere, right? So why are there not more Orient Express cards specifically? They were a good tag team, especially and with Bad Company and AWA, I believe, and they just don't have a big collecting base. Like even Pat Tanaka, I see he's got some. I believe he's got some Leaf autos, and they don't go for very much. It's just they're not cardboard relevant, and I think that's something that a lot of wrestling card collectors need and wrestling fans need to get through their head. Is it's just like sports. When you look at sports cards, there's like the top 5%, the LeBron, the Jordan, Kobe, like that is what Tom Brady, those kind of names is what drives that top percent. But that doesn't mean that there's not other collectors going after one of ones or autos or anything like that. That's why I always say that, super collecting is a great way to go because you can just narrow in on that superstar that you want to collect and go for everything you can of it, especially with like Orient Express cards. I think, they may, I don't know, if you figure in Pat Tanaka, they may have under 20 cards total. I don't know. I'm just kind of off the top of my head here. But, again, cardboard relevancy, do they matter? Is there a market for it? And if not, why? And, people might just not be collecting them, like I said, but that doesn't mean you can't collect them. So if you want to put together an Orient Express, PC that's trying to get signed or whatever, go for it. Every card has a home. So let's move on. That's it for the Patreon questions. Thank you, patrons, for being a member of the Patreon community and submitting questions. Let's move on to some podcast topics. Speaking of podcasts, once again, I've got some merch for sale. I've got the first ever Wrestling with Cards relic card. These are numbered to 10, hand signed, and that is the Bam Bam Terry Gordy relic from the shirt that I've worn numerous times. Hand numbered on the back. It'll say that this was used in a video. So if you're interested in those are $50 shipped anywhere in the United States. So just let me know if you're interested in one of those. Again, there's only 10. Lastly, I do have t-shirt fiasco we all know about. I have Wrestling with Cards t-shirts. Cool logo on the front, black metal-esque, and on the back it says True Wrestling Card Collector. If you're interested in any of those, I have 2 left. They are size adult large. If that would work for you, those are $30 shipped anywhere in the United States. If you're outside the United States and you want either of the card or the shirts, let me know. We'll figure something out. I'll get them to you. So let's move over to the podcast because the merchandise supports the podcast. Let's start with Worlds Collide. We're going to keep doing this as long as possible. We always say that, but I ask you to just have patience with us. If for some reason we miss a week or something, Tony just opened Wrestling Guy Store Phoenix. It's not technically open yet. They're going to be having a soft opening soon, but he's putting a lot of his time and efforts and money into getting this store off the ground. So there may be times where, based on my schedule, I can't jive with his schedule. We can't get it done or whatever. So I just ask that you have patience and just continue to share the show, because even if we miss a week or something, we're going to try to do this as much as possible. And we batch recorded. So that's another thing. You may see something that's maybe out of order when we're talking, like in the show, like one week it might be this, but the next week we might have referenced something in the future that didn't jive right. So just be patient with that too. But again, share the Worlds Collide podcast with everybody you know that's into wrestling cards, because there's so much good content in the archives. Even though we're making some people mad, again, going to touch on that in a minute for all the curmudgeons out there. Let's move on to the Wrestling with Cards podcast, my podcast. If anybody has listening to it, which I encourage you to check the links out below for both of the links to the podcast. If you've listened to my podcast, you kind of know how things have been going. I used to repurpose a lot of the interviews you'll see on this channel on there. Not doing that anymore. I'm mainly doing just straight up quick audio of my thoughts and opinions on things and just kind of spitballing. I think it's fun to have that type of creative outlet is different than doing video. And there are things I've talked about that I want to do that maybe don't require a full video, but the audio works better for it. So again, check that out and just keep that in mind. When I put a lot of this content out, it's not to specifically talk about the wrestling cards. A lot of time it's talking about what goes on behind the wrestling cards, the thought process of buying or trading or flipping stuff or starting a business or whatever it is. Kind of the behind the what is why people buy specific cards and collect certain things. So I think also I've settled in on the Wrestling with Cards podcast being a bi-weekly release. So that gives me time to record, edit, make sure one of those is coming out every 2 weeks, and then have time to promote it on the weeks in between. And I had stopped doing a lot of the podcasts, the podcast for Wrestling with Cards. I'd stopped doing a lot of them altogether. Earlier, I think there was like a period where I was like having a 3 month break, and I talked about it flat out. Anchor took away the ads for some reason, so I wasn't getting paid for any of the podcast streams. And it is a creative outlet. This is something that's fun to do to provide information and context and just fun banter about wrestling cards. But I'm also at a point with time where if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. And when I say dollars, I even mean fractions of a penny of a dollar. If I'm getting paid anything, hey, it's worth it to have some fun talking to you guys today and getting paid for it, even if it's a very little amount. So Anchor brought back the ads. I started doing the podcast again, tweaking the format. And going forward, as of this recording, it will be a bi-weekly release. So I'm going to take a quick pause, and then we're going to get into probably one of the main topics of this live stream. Mountain Dew today. Zero sugar Mountain Dew. Okay. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Hobby Feuds, community, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is. Absolutely ridiculous. There's so much nonsense going on. Like, okay, let's stop and think about this. We collect pieces of cardboard with men in their underwear on it. And there are people out there getting, not just having a discussion or a debate or a poll where you can vote, but having like full-blown temper tantrums or, hating other people based on what they collect or what they said about somebody else. I'm just baffled because I've had people that say my show sucks. Cool, thanks for watching. To in general, to tell me that you think it sucks, I'm okay with that. I don't care. Like, I want to build a community. I want to talk to people about wrestling cards. I'm not out here to bow down to anybody or make a bunch of friends to like basically everybody kind of, I don't know what the term I want to use is, but I'm not here to have fun. I'm not here to collect cards. It's okay to have different opinions about me or my content or my cards and vice versa. And I really think that that's what all of this Twitter wrestling card community nonsense that we've seen since, again, it started with Prism and it's just been a nonstop. And I think it's boiled down to opinions. Every single person is allowed to have an opinion of any type. And that's okay. You can dislike other people's opinions. That's okay. But I think we're to the point where if you have an opinion that doesn't exactly jive with everyone else's opinion, you don't know what you're talking about. You're an idiot. You're a poser. You're a wannabe collector. Nobody's allowed to have their own opinions anymore. That's kind of, if your opinion doesn't agree with a certain segment, then you're an idiot. And a lot of these people, they form these little cliques and they block you or they get people to unsubscribe to you, and they won't actually reach out to you to have a conversation. Me and Tony have talked many times about getting people on, whether it's my show, whether it's Worlds Collide, whether it's WTC TV. We have these platforms, and a lot of these people are invited to discuss disagreements that anybody's had within. And I'm not just talking about like opinion disagreements. Like, sure, we can talk about that, but if we're flat out wrong, like say, let's say I hold up a card and I say, this card is card number 6 and it was produced in 1985. And you say, well, actually, I have the same thing and it says card number 7 and it says 1986. That is a legitimate discussion where somebody may be wrong or right, or maybe it's a combination of the two. But when we're talking opinions, because I specifically don't like seeing gold refractors all the time, I've talked about that. That doesn't mean that if I see someone's cool gold refractor card, I'm not going to like it, share it, get that card visibility out to more collectors, because I'm all about growing the hobby. I'm not over here to, form this group of minions around me to bow down and worship me. I don't care. Like, I'm here to collect wrestling cards. And, a lot of the people who don't like that aspect and they want to be the best of the best, or, they've been around for 40 years doing this and they're the end all be all, like, okay, cool. Maybe you are, maybe you're not, but that's not what I'm about. And I'm just trying to have fun in the community. So once again, I think this all boils down to opinions. And I don't like a lot of the stuff I see, but I don't feel like I need to go on a tirade about it or cry about it. Just because someone's opinion is disagreeing with what I think or I say, okay, so what? It's not going to slow me down on anything I'm doing in the hobby. I'm waking up every morning having a blast with doing content, doing the eBay store, jumping on social media for a little bit. I've talked about before, I don't live on social media like some of these people. So I don't see a lot of the stuff that's going on. And again, if nobody's tagging me, I don't know about a lot of it. So I spend maybe 5 minutes a day total on social media. So I miss a lot of stuff. But speaking of this, I did record, I was talking about releasing bi-weekly content. I did record an episode talking about, all the egos in the hobby, and checking your ego at the door is actually what the name of it is called. So I'm sure this is going to make a whole bunch of people mad. This live stream is going to get people butthurt. I can't wait until the podcast comes out and everybody just trolls me and throws all the hate on me. Bring it. I don't care. I'm here to have fun doing wrestling cards. I'm not here to be the best or the original or whatever. Don't care. So when that podcast comes out, again, it's probably, I think it's 3 weeks. I have to schedule these out. So I think it'll be in about 3 weeks, but it'll reopen all this stuff all over again. And people will be coming at me and, oh, you said this about this. Or, well, actually, they won't, because nobody tags me anything. They just talk within their little circles and block and mute me or whatever, which, again, whatever. It's not going to stop me from doing anything I want to do and having fun in the hobby. So let's move on to the last part of this live stream. And again, I appreciate you for watching this. If you've joined live, fantastic. If you're not, if you're watching this on the replay, thanks for stopping by. If you've enjoyed anything I've said or any of my other content, please subscribe, hit the like button, and just spread the word about the channel. Hopefully we can continue to do more of these live streams. Again, I know it's a weird time, but I just got to do them when I can, right? All right, so let's move on to another interesting topic. I wouldn't say this is a controversial topic, but there are some people who question why I talk about this. And that is, why do I consume non-wrestling card content? And the fact is that I don't want to be one of these clowns that's stuck in the wrestling card bubble that only knows what they don't know outside markets of sports or, non-sport and rarity and the Prism brand or, national treasure, like whatever it is, bringing that back into wrestling with a knowledge base. I understand wrestling cards aren't always going to work like that, but in this instance, it's helped me so much from a buying and selling perspective. So what I wanted to do is just take a minute to talk about some of the non-wrestling card content that I actually like to consume, and actually breaking down some of what it is in these podcasts that I learn from and how it can help you. So let's start off. This is some of it's non-hobby, so I'll break that down as well. The first one is non-hobby, Between the Sheets podcast, hosted by Chris Zellner and David Bixenspan. And what it is each week they pick a week and they go back through the wrestling dirt sheets. It's the Observer or what Wade Keller, like they switch it up. Sometimes they use both and they use clips. It is a fantastic, and it's a long listen too. Like some of these shows are 3, 4, 5 hours long. So it may be, breaking it up throughout the week of your podcast listening, but there's so much awesome information that you can learn from this. And I look at, because I'm not a huge like dirt sheet person, but what I like to look at it as is from the perspective of wrestling history. So there's so much you can go back and learn about the territory days when it's basically the stuff from like maybe the early 2000s backwards. It's always interesting to me. And maybe I'm thinking that interest helps you learn more about talent, which maybe, as I've talked about before, wrestling card history knowledge then translates back to the wrestling cards. I mentioned Orient Express. Let's take Hillbilly Jim. All of a sudden, somebody rediscovers his run in Memphis as Harley Davidson, I believe. And then they kind of correlate that back to the cards and go after the, vintage stuff or put together stuff that they've learned of characters that they're really, really attached to for that period of time. So that's why I like Between the Sheets with Chris and David. Make sure to check that out. Next one, again, non-hobby. Let's start with the Bigger Pockets podcast. And this is a real estate investing podcast. Why am I talking about real estate investing podcast on a wrestling card live stream? Again, it's an investing podcast. That should say it right there. And I've actually listened to a lot of these real estate agents or flippers or wholesalers, like whoever is on there. I actually learn a lot from what they do with housing into wrestling cards or cards in general, as far as like, when they find a good deal, and they talk about renovating it and or if they get a multifamily. I kind of look at some of that stuff like when I buy collections, and there are so many parallels between the two, but people just don't think about it because, again, you're stuck in that wrestling card mindset and not going anywhere else. The other non-hobby is the Smart Passive Income podcast, and that is more of a just like a creative and a motivate. I'll call it more of a motivational, but it is like tactical as well. There are steps that they put in there as well. Content creation, going after whatever it is you want to do, not being afraid of failure, learning, just continuing. So if you've ever wanted to put out content or just kind of need some more of like motivational talk to get going, whatever it is, the project you want to get going, again, Smart Passive Income podcast is great. Now let's move on to some hobby talk. Now, some of these are going to be pretty mainstream, and many of you might know them. If you don't, give them a shot, and I'll break down why. So we're going to start off first with I've got some honorable mentions, and the reason I say honorable mentions is because I've either talked about them before, I've had them on this channel interviewing them, or they've had me on their channel. So I got a list: Wax Pack Hero Sports Card Minute with Mike Summer, Stacking Slabs Podcast, Brett McGrath, Sports Card Nobody with Shane, and the Sports Card Therapist podcast with Rob. Make sure to go check those out if you haven't already. And also, if you're curious on their personalities and why they kind of mix with sports cards and wrestling, make sure to go check out the archives of this channel for my interviews with them. I had a great time talking to them. So first up, Hobby Evolution. And I've shout out to Bo Thompson, 1 Million Cubs. You guys may know him. He started his YouTube channel during the pandemic and does a live stream nearly every morning, kind of like what I'm doing here. And it's fun that that's flat out why I wanted to start doing live streams, because I saw how much fun he was having interacting with the chat. And I thought it'd be fun to kind of try that and see if I can build a rapport with audience, just having fun. I mean, you're going to get sports card talk. You're going to get some market talk, but you're also going to get Casey's Pizza talk. You're going to get some coffee talk. You're going to get some horror movie talk, some wrestling talk. And again, I interviewed Bo on this channel. You can go back and check that in the archives, but definitely check that out. Hobby Evolution on YouTube, 1 Million Cubs Project, Bo Thompson. Great, fantastic information. Moving on, Lucas Tigers and Bronze. I'm sure you guys have seen my icon on all my social media, pink background with the tiger, coffee, tattoo, Mike Tyson tattoo. That is their NFT that, I do like to support content creators that of the content I like. So when I knew they were having NFTs, I was like, I've got to have some of these. So Lucas Tigers and Bronze, every single day, they're not missing a day of the last, I don't know, like 2 years, 2.5 years, something like that. Every single day they've got an episode out. And yes, it's mainly sports cards, but it's also market talk. It's all different kinds of ways that they have done things that I've actually learned and then applied in wrestling, and it's worked. Who would have thought, right? So definitely check that out. It's available on all popular podcast platforms. Next up is the crossover. This is one that a lot of people probably know. Card Ladder crew, Josh, Chris, Christina, they get together on Instagram every Friday night and do like approximately a 2-hour show. You can join in if you want to follow it on Instagram. I personally don't ever catch it then. I like to watch it on YouTube. So I watch it like the following week when it's put out. And again, like it's collector focused, but these guys know what they're talking about. They're smart. They have these big boy cards. They're not wanting to sell them. So you're getting a little bit of the, smart money talk, but also the true collector talk, which sometimes that goes overboard. But overall, from the crossover, I just learned so much from, these collectors and their views on things, their views on higher end stuff. And, sometimes they talk, it's a heavy basketball show, right? They're huge basketball fans. So sometimes if it gets too into like NBA talk, I'll probably skip it because I'm not an NBA guy unless it's like, 90s vintage stuff. But next show, again, another mainstream one is Card Talk Pod. Ryan, Tyler, Lou, 137 it's put out by 137 Gary V Company. And they always, I made it to their play of the week with, I talked about buying a lot of 2002 Flair Royal Rumbles, graded the John Cena out of that and sold it for, I don't know, it was like $900 or something like that. I don't remember, but it actually was featured on their show. So that was cool. But again, they're talking about more product releases, modern stuff, Q&A. I will say that like Ryan's value box stuff that he talks about, Guys, there's no excuse. If you've ever wanted to like flip cards you don't care about and take that chance, like operating like a little business, the CEO of your PC, dumping that money back into your actual PC, fund a self-sustaining hobby, so to speak, like what I always preach on here. Check out Ryan's YouTube channel as well, and what they talk about as far as the make a play stuff and all of their segments. They talk about flipping on the Card Talk Pod because it's so much step-by-step instructions of how you turn a quarter into $5. And if you do that at scale, kind of like what I do with my eBay store, before you know it, you've got an amazing fund to buy those PC items you want, or pay some bills, or buy a car, or whatever it is you need to do. So check out Car Talk Pod. And lastly, Kyle from the Wax Museum. I maybe should have put him in the honorable mentions. I've had Kyle on to talk about his aspect of the NBA with patch cards and relic cards and his fandom of wrestling, because a lot of these sports card guys that don't talk a lot about wrestling, it's not that they weren't wrestling fan at one point, and it's not that they don't know nothing about wrestling. They're just not in it like we are in it in the wrestling card community. They're more of the sports stuff. So when I can take what all these guys that I've listed, and girls, whatever they're saying, and kind of from the sports card world, if I see that it's working and I can bring it back into wrestling cards, whether it's what is the prism parallels that people are going to want, why is Galactics so important compared to any other parallel in Revolution, things like that I can take and then put into wrestling cards and go, aha, yep, that's why that works. Maybe not so much here. This worked, that didn't work either, and just go back and forth. So I just wanted to put that out there to give you guys some more content to listen to and maybe help you in your journey for wrestling cards. So that's all I had for today. Thanks for stopping by. Again, hit the subscribe button. Give me a like if you appreciated this, and stand by for a couple of weeks where I have the podcast, the Wrestling with Cards podcast, that's absolutely going to make some people really angry with me. And hey, that's okay, because if you're mad at me, I got your listen and I got your download. So until next time, please subscribe. See you on social media at Zhan Morning. Check the links in the show notes for all the ways you can help show your support for my content. Out.